This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.
Welcome to the April 2025 episode of RCV Clips, our podcast about all things ranked choice voting. I'm Kelly, a member of the Resource Center staff, and in today's episode, I'll be talking with Tiffany and Matt, two members of our staff here at the Resource Center, about the recent RCV elections in Redondo Beach, California. Tiffany, Matt, thank you so much for joining me today on RCV Clips.
Hey, y'all, glad to be here.
Hello, psyched to be back.
It's good to have you back. So we haven't done this in a little while, and I'm going a little off script because I love to do that. So let's do a little icebreaker since it's all staff members today, and we always like for people to get to know us. It's a famous one for RCV Clips, so I'm going to just throw it out there for today. If you had a walk-on song today, what would it be?
I'm going to have to say Disco Man by Remy Wolf.
Right now, top of my head, I'm going to say Thunderstruck by AC/DC.
I love it. Well, thank you for indulging me just a little bit and sharing with our audience a little bit about our personalities. But let's go ahead and get started talking about Redondo Beach. So first of all, give us a little background on the Redondo Beach adoption, their implementation. Why did they decide to use RCV? Why was it adopted?
Back in 2023, voters approved of using RCV in their municipal elections. And actually, 77% of voters approved of that. And it was set to be implemented this year. And so they had their first run of it in March, just, I guess, last month. It's only April. And it went really well. So they are actually, Redondo Beach is in LA County, and they're the first city in LA County to use ranked choice voting, which is pretty cool for them. And I think, there's a lot of reasons why jurisdictions will want to switch to something like ranked choice voting. But I think one of the biggest ones for Redondo Beach was saving money on runoff elections. Runoff elections are expensive, and not only that, but usually they have a much lower voter turnout, which means less people are having a say in who actually wins. And in Redondo Beach, just recently, like not in all of their history, but recently, they had a runoff election in 2013, 2015, and 2017. And normally, there in Redondo Beach, they cost about $150,000 to have one of those. But I think I saw in 2013, that one cost like around $300,000. So it's a lot of money. And by taking away runoffs, by having, an instant runoff, like ranked choice voting, then they're saving so much money by doing that. And I think, they wanted an alternative method, to help with that.
Absolutely. And I always think, when you have runoffs like that in a small city or in anywhere, your voter turnout drops significantly from the general election to your runoff. So it's sort of a win-win all around. One interesting thing, I think, not all cities can do ranked choice or have the ability to adopt ranked choice voting in California. That Redondo Beach happens to be a charter city, and they're the only ones that actually can adopt under state law right now. So glad that Redondo Beach was able to do that. So let's talk a little bit. So this is a big change. They're changing the way they do their elections. Tell us a little bit about what is the staff capacity in somewhere like Redondo Beach, smaller town, LA County. What staff size do they have? Are they able to do they have enough staff to be able to implement this effectively and quickly?
They have a really small staff there in the city clerk's office. And it's not just them. I mean, we see this in elections offices all over the country. Unfortunately, they're understaffed and under-resourced. And that was the case there in Redondo Beach too. The city clerk, her name is Eleanor Manzano. Super, super great. I mean, really did a really great job on this, especially, like I said, with such limited resources. I was talking to her about it, and normally she has like five full-time staff members, including herself. But during this whole election, the planning, everything, she was down 2 full-time staff members, which is that's like basically half of her staff, right? They hired a consultant to help with election stuff because actually, the city clerk's office there, like many all over the country, they don't just do elections. In Redondo Beach, that office is handling public records. They're preparing city council minutes and agendas and the videos, the video recordings of them. They are overseeing commissions and committees, the recruitment of them, just how they run, all of that, scheduling, elections, like I said. And then also they're in charge of overseeing the municipal code and charter maintenance and distribution. So they're doing a lot of things. She's down half of her staff, basically. And so when it came to the actual like election planning part of it and the implementation, it was her and 1 to 2 other people helping. Like that's it, that were there in her office. And one of those people was, like I said, a consultant. So that's not a full-time person either. And then with the actual, it's administering the election, right? So Redondo Beach is an all-by-mail jurisdiction. And so they've got ballots coming in. And so during that time, she did say that she had anywhere from 4 to 15 part-time employees from other departments in the city helping with ballot processing. And I got to see that firsthand when Matt and I were there one of the times before the election. And I saw a city police officer like processing ballots. And at first I thought, is that like a security rule here? Like that's hardcore. Whoa. But then I asked her about it and she was like, no, it's just, if other departments are able to send somebody to help, they are, because, we need help. So that was, that was pretty amazing to see, but just, not a lot of people. And so to do what they did, one, just doing an election in any kind of election, like that's not a lot of people to do that. But then to implement something totally new, like ranked choice voting, is, that was really amazing of them. And they were able to work with us, which was really great. And I know that was helpful for them. And they had a couple of volunteers from Humboldt County, which is up in Northern California, who were there to help with, election stuff and tabulation and things like that. So that was really cool to kind of see other people from the state kind of jumping in to help where they could.
Absolutely. With Redondo Beach having over 40,000 registered voters, I can't imagine being a staff of 1 or 2 or 2.5 people, having to implement something new, educate voters, create different kinds of ballots, different kinds of tabulation, learn all the ins and outs of that. Which brings me to our next question. Let's talk a little bit about our role in Redondo Beach. How did we help? What were we doing? Why were we there?
What we were doing in Redondo Beach really goes back to the mission of the Resource Center, which is just helping make ranked choice voting elections successful. And we've been lucky enough to be involved with a couple of implementations recently and first-time implementations recently. So in the state of Maine, for their congressional contest, for some municipal contests in Maine, in Portland, Oregon, for their municipal contest. And what we try to do as we help those municipalities, when there are new municipalities going through that same thing, we try to bring along some of that wisdom, some of the experience that we had from those implementations, and help Redondo Beach, as they're the first in many ways, like the first in California to use HART's voting system with ranked choice voting. And I know they're through all that work with implementations that we do, there's a lot of things that are the same. And I know we say this, probably that you hear it on every single RCV Clips podcast. We say it in our meetings all the time, 50 states, 50 ways, plus the District of Columbia. And I think as I was preparing for this, I was like, well, this isn't even a state. This is like a jurisdiction. I don't know how many like municipalities there are, like maybe a jillion, but it's like a jillion municipalities, a jillion different ways. Like truly, there's something different with every place that we go to. And so we try to apply the lessons we've learned, but it's always something different. And that's something that we noticed in Redondo too. And at a broad level in Redondo, we did all the things that we do with other jurisdictions. We help them out with things like ballot design, voter education, the voting system itself. We used RCTab, our software, in this election. We helped with results reporting. So a little bit of everything that we do here. We worked with Redondo and Hart on this first-time implementation.
The other thing about different cities, different ways, and there's a jillion of them, is in California, Kelly had mentioned that Redondo Beach is a charter city. And so in California, there's charter cities and then there are general law cities. And a charter city is able to make their own rules about city elections. And a general law city has to rely on state election laws. And so Redondo Beach is actually one of just 25 charter cities in LA County. And LA County has I think over 80 cities. I don't know, something crazy like that, but that you would expect from LA, right? And so, they're able to make their own laws, but on top of that, they actually sued to have even more discretion over their elections, because back in 2018 in California, a law was going into place, and it was from SB 415. And basically that law said that that cities had to consolidate their elections with statewide elections, which meant that they would have to be held on the same day as a statewide election and, basically on the same ballot. And Redondo Beach was like, no, that's not going to work for us. And so they sued the state and they won. And they were able to, run the election the way that they wanted on the day that they wanted to do. And I mentioned that because, we're talking about different cities, but also because that helped lead to this other part that worked out really well for them, because they were going to eventually in the future implement ranked choice voting. And that's that until that point, they had been contracting with LA County to administer their elections. And LA County was, coordinating election stuff for them. But, the lawsuit happened and everything like that, and they weren't going to have to consolidate their elections, in accordance with that law. So they stopped contracting with LA County and started working with third-party vendors, like Hart, for instance, is one of them. And that was good because LA County's election equipment is not RCV capable, and Hart's is. So that needed to happen in order for them to actually pull off a ranked choice voting election that they would eventually do. And it's just, 50 states, 50 different ways, but also 82 cities in LA County and 82 different ways, basically. So kind of crazy.
Absolutely. And I think that brings to light something else is, some of the considerations that jurisdictions need to make do involve their systems. Do they have voting systems that are compatible with ranked choice voting? If they have a system, is it up to date enough to be compatible with ranked choice voting? And I'm going to make a little plug here. I love it when this happens organically, and calling it out's even more fun. But RCV Maps, if you are not familiar, listeners, with that project, we're working on the 2025 edition, but the 2023 edition is still a useful resource until that one comes out. Will really tell you what your state, their individual reports, 50 different reports plus a DC report that outline the voting system capabilities in your state. So, take a look at those, be on the lookout late summer, early fall for the new additions. And that can really help folks understand what needs to happen in order to have a ranked choice voting election. I wanted to bring something else up too, because you mentioned Humboldt County and specifically why Humboldt County was there helping. Eureka, California, which is located in Humboldt County, voted ranked choice voting a number of years ago. They were supposed to use it this fall, ended up not having enough candidates to run, but they also are an RCV charter city use of this voting method. So interesting to hear and see, what happens in California as this moves forward. So let's switch gears here just a little bit. Elections are highly governed by process and procedure. And one of those processes that can happen in post-election work is a hand count. Tiffany, I'll let you explain a little bit about why that's important here in just a minute. But one of the resources that we developed over the last year is a hand count toolkit for proportional ranked choice voting. We worked closely with Portland, Oregon as they implemented their first ever, they actually did quite a bit of city government reform, but their first ever proportional ranked choice voting election, their first single winner ranked choice voting elections for their mayor. And we had developed this toolkit for them. Can you explain how we use this resource that we developed for a different jurisdiction to assist us with our help in Redondo Beach?
That was another really cool thing that we did get to do. We worked with Multnomah County there in Portland, Oregon, to help them develop their procedures for a hand count recount. And so moving to California now, in California, they are required to do a manual tally, which is basically like a hand count, right, of a certain percentage of ballots that they receive. And so Redondo Beach, just like everywhere else there, they had a set of procedures already in place that they had been using for forever, and which worked probably perfectly for the elections as they always were. But, ranked choice voting comes along, and I tell people all the time, it doesn't change everything about an election, but it does change some things, and sometimes things that you wouldn't even think that would need to be changed. And for Redondo Beach, their manual tally procedures was one of those things. Matt and I were there before the election working on some stuff, and they started to do like a test run of their manual tally. And Matt and I are looking at each other like, I think this could maybe use some fine tuning with like maybe some stuff that we learned in Portland, right? And so we talk with them about it, and we're like, hey, we've got this really great set of procedures that's been tested before, and we think we can incorporate it into your laws and your procedures to make this manual tally run smoothly and be accurate. And so we're like, all right, grab us the blue masking tape and some Post-it notes and Sharpies and a lot of table space. And so we basically start to like physically set it up the way that we had learned how to set it up there in Portland, because in Redondo Beach, what they had always needed to do was just they're counting votes, right? They were only counting first choices basically. And now for a hand count, they actually have to count all the first round and then physically move those ballots around when a candidate is eliminated, right? In order for them to count round by round. And so we worked with them to develop the procedures for them to do that, right? In order so that they can do their manual tally. And it was really cool because we got to help them make that. And then when we were there for their tabulation, right after tabulation is when they were going to have to actually do their manual tally. And so I got to see them do that and use, a lot of those same things that were developed in Portland and it was just really neat to see it used in an official capacity. Luckily, Portland, Oregon did not have to do a recount. And so it was only ever tested there. But, now it's been done for real, IRL. And it worked. And it was just really cool to see that. In fact, I took a couple of pictures and I sent it over to Leah, who works for Multnomah County. And I was like, oh my gosh, look what they're doing. Like, it's spreading. And that's the hope. And that's why we're doing what we do, because we're making these best practices, and then we're going to go spread them around to whoever needs them. And Redondo Beach needed that. And that's what happened. And so that it's just really cool.
I love that sentiment. It's sort of like, let's go spread the love around. Let's go spread the RCV love around. And it does feel good, because in my mind, when we're doing this and meeting this mission of helping make ranked choice voting elections successful, we're making it accessible first to the election officials, but most importantly to millions of voters. And to impact that and allow those voters to have their voices heard feels like a really great reason to do all this. And I know we are not advocates, but we are truly people who are dedicated to making sure every vote counts and every voice counts. Matt, I know that you probably want to comment in on this too, because this is really important. This is sort of at the heart of the matter of what we do.
Yeah, and I think it was so interesting to me. I felt very lucky that we were there in person with Redondo, because like Tiffany was saying, we had done this in Portland and had a feel for, like where the like edges were, where you needed to be real specific, and where you could kind of have more general ideas about how to do the hand count. And, we had it all written up. You've got like 20 pages of guidelines, which is certainly helpful. But to be there in person, to see what they were doing beforehand, and like what they already knew how to do, to be able to talk with them, to be in the same room with them, as we can make suggestions like, well, in Portland, this worked really well. How can we apply that here? Like, I just felt so lucky to be able to save a bunch of frustration, like that we'd already done it in Portland and learned a bunch of lessons. And it feels so good to like see it tangibly in use, like really helping out these like jurisdictions that are already squeezed.
One thing I think we've learned since 2020 is the vast importance of human interaction. I'm always a proponent, and Matt and Tiffany can attest to this, that the more places we can be in person, shaking hands, talking to someone, getting to know them on a personal level, the better trusted messenger, trusted helper we can be. And so I was really excited that we were able to have staff out in Redondo Beach a couple times this year, and really hold hands with them essentially and walk them through the processes, and help them get through this first implementation. There was something else really exciting about this implementation. And Matt, I'm not going to steal your thunder on this. See, what is the thunder theme today? Tiffany and Kelly, all thunder. But something was done for the very first time in Redondo Beach. What happened in Redondo Beach that was done for the first time?
Redondo Beach was the very first time that RCTab was used with a heart voting system in a live election. But yeah, it was really great to be there together with the Redondo Beach team and Hearts team, like throughout the process of the first time implementation. And I think, piggybacking a little bit on what we just talked about, like how important it is to physically be there, that made the technical implementation and stitching together Heart's system and the RCTab system like that much easier, right? Like being able to talk about how they were using it and what needs to happen now was super helpful. And just a little more detail about how RCTab plugs into this. So Heart's voting system was used, as it always has been, for like ballot design, like ballot capture. And once they have all those ballots, they're scanned into the scanners, and that creates like a digital representation of the ballots, the cast vote record. And at that point, that's when RCTab comes in. RCTab takes those cast vote records and runs the round by round tabulation to get to a ranked choice voting winner. And in California, RCTab is used as like a separate tabulator on a separate machine from the hardware and software. And with some planning, you can get those cast vote records to RCTab and do that round by round.
Yeah, and having been
reporting.
involved along the way in some of the documentation, writing, and all that, I can say also that not only is it's on a separate device, but it is highly secured, and there are, again, governing processes and procedures that make sure there's a chain of custody, and there's everything is done appropriately. The computer is hardened, it's non-internet connected, so there's a lot of thought that goes into how this tabulation ultimately is completed.
They actually keep their election computers in a vault within City Hall, a real vault, like a bank vault. And we got to see it. It was pretty cool, but it's like, yeah, this is secure.
That's a really good message to send out to our listeners who probably already know that anyway. To be fair, we're sort of a niche topic, but when we think about folks who don't understand whether or not elections are safe, when I explain to them things like Redondo Beach keeps their election computers in a vault, they're sort of surprised and shocked. And I explain that, this is not a fly by the seat of your pants kind of, production. Anywhere you go, these are people really dedicated to safety, security, and the integrity of the vote. So that's really interesting. I'm glad you shared that because I did not know that they kept it in a vault. So really exciting to hear about those kinds of security procedures. It's really exciting to see how far RCTab has come. And I've been with the Resource Center 5 years, and we have really been through a number of iterations, getting ready to come out with RCTab 2.0. I know that Matt's excited about that. Some great new functions and features will be coming along with that, but that's for a different show. Matt, we're going to have you back on here to talk about that another day. One of the things that we love to talk about when we work with these different jurisdictions is, what are some of the lessons that we learned? What are the things that, often we learn helpful things that help us help other jurisdictions, or things that we can improve or help the jurisdiction do better? What are some of the lessons we learned in the Redondo Beach implementation?
Nothing beats working in person with the election administrators, because I don't like it when someone comes into my job and it's like, hey, like, I know exactly how to use this thing, like, let me just tell you, blah 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 blah, right? Like, I want to have a conversation, I want to get to know someone, like, before I implement this thing for the very first time. Like, it's scary doing something for the first time, and just developing that relationship and making it okay to, like, be vulnerable about, like, I don't really know, like, I'm not sure I understand this all the way. Like, it's really awesome to be able to be in person, to develop those relationships and, like, really strengthen that like, ability to say, like, hey, can you explain that to me again? Like, can you help me? Like, how do I communicate this to other people, my voters? Or how do I communicate this to like, when I'm talking with software vendors? I think it's just, I feel so lucky at the Resource Center that we can go in person and work with these jurisdictions on these new implementations.
Yeah, I really love that our staff as a whole really values the personal, the people side of elections. And, we are just as much of a learner in these situations as the election officials, because I know every time I talk to an election official, I learn something new. And so many things that they say to me along the way. And I'm going to there's a reason I'm telling the story a little bit, it really stick with me about what happens in the elections office. And most of you, if you know Tiffany, she was in the elections office in Alaska through their 2020 implementation of ranked choice voting. And one of the interesting things she said to me, and it's something I knew in my head, but nobody had really said it. Lots of people wanted to offer help and lots of people wanted to offer ideas, but ultimately the election office is there to implement the law. And that's who they were. They were the law. And I remember distinctly Tiffany telling me that was even before you worked here, Tiff, and thinking, that's a really great way to look at it, because then we can position ourselves in the advisory capacity to really walk into an election office and say, hey, we're not here to tell you what to do. We're not here to change the way you do things. We're here to help you look at the overall picture of your elections and figure out where RCV fits in that. And we have some experience with this in other jurisdictions. We know some tips and tricks, but ultimately, this is about your jurisdiction and putting us there in place in their office, working with them is really critical. So I appreciate the willingness of our staff to do that and to continue to keep the people focus. Tiffany, I know that you have some lessons learned too. You're getting one of the best podcasts, in my opinion, because it's the three of the most talkative people on staff. So we all love to talk and love to have a microphone. So, but Tiffany, what are some of the lessons that you learned with Redondo Beach?
It's a lot of the same of what Matt said. Working in person was really helpful. We got to go there twice. Once was for their logic and accuracy testing, and once was when they did tabulation. So, results tabulation, and that was a big day. I will say, though, something I learned is I think I would prefer Matt to go on all the trips, because when he and I were there for logic and accuracy testing, it was beautiful. It was sunny. The weather was just perfect. We were walking everywhere. Chamber of Commerce days in Redondo Beach. And then we went back for tabulation, and unfortunately Matt was not able to make it with us. And it was raining every day. It was overcast. It was just like kind of ugly. You could barely see the water. It was like, wow, we came all the way over here and this is the weather. And so Matt evidently brings the sun into things. And so I learned that I would prefer Matt to also be there with the gang if we are somewhere. But so that was one thing. That's just kind of a fun thing. But I think, and this is something that I think we already know, but just it was reiterated, is the importance of doing as much to prepare for something well in advance. There's so many new things, and sometimes you don't always know everything that's going to have to change or that you're going to have to change. And so, it's important to kind of try to work through those things before it's too late or before the last minute. And I think something that we learned at the Resource Center was, we got a better idea of what some of those things are that are sometimes overlooked, and that now we can kind of put it into like a checkoff list for administrators. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Do you think this affects that? Because sometimes it might. And that was something I think that I took away from Redondo Beach after, going through a bunch of processes and procedures with them, especially when it came to something like adjudication. We worked a lot with them and with Hart on that part. How was RCTab going to communicate with Hart, and all of that together going to follow the laws there in Redondo Beach and in California. And so I think just learning the importance of kind of being able to go through that checklist well in advance and figure out, what needs work and maybe what doesn't, maybe what's something that we can just kind of put to the side for a little bit because this other thing might be a little more important than that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Tiff, is, I talk about it a lot, making software. There's known unknowns, like, okay, I know that I've never done this before and I'm going to need to give some extra time to it. But the things that really mess with me are the unknown unknowns, the things that show up like when you're doing something for the first time. And that's definitely something that I've realized in the implementations that we've done, is like there are some unknown unknowns almost in each place. And yeah, the more you can get ahead of it, the better.
Absolutely. I think those are all fantastic things to point out about, implementations generally and the work we did in Redondo Beach. Matt, I have high expectations for our Charlotte trip in a few weeks. So bring the sunshine. I already know you're looking for good restaurants. So we'll be set. We're getting to the end of the podcast. We've gone a little bit longer than we normally go. But we always have to ask our final question. This is an RCV Clips famous question. Describe Redondo Beach ranked choice voting election in 3 words or less.
I would say learning every day. We are definitely, I consider the Resource Center RCV experts, but showing up to these implementations with like a beginner's mindset, like I am learning from Redondo Beach. I'm like learning from the past implementations we've done. Like, I think it's so important to approach these like with a mindset of trying to learn from each and every one of them, get a little bit better each time.
Okay, and mine are overall a success.
I love that. I think that's a great one. I was thinking about 2 different ones. I was thinking Redondo Beach rocks, and then it sort of went into our staff rocks. So congratulations on. I love that. I kept thinking about my 3 words for this particular episode, and I thought, Redondo Beach rocks, which led me to our staff rocks. Congratulations on the work that you did in Redondo Beach and the work that you continue to do around the country as we support election administrators. Matt, Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Kelly.
And now for this month's final round, where we share an interesting bit of trivia, a useful tidbit, or just something we thought was cool for folks to know about ranked choice voting. Here's Ryan Kirby with this month's final round.
Did you know that even more cities are using RCV for the first time this year? Charlottesville, Virginia will be using proportional RCV in their June primary, and Fort Collins, Colorado is scheduled to use single winner RCV in their local elections this fall. Charlottesville is even using HART equipment just like Redondo Beach. That makes Charlottesville HART's first proportional RCV election too. This RCV advancement makes it this month's final round.
Thank you for joining us today for our April 2025 RCV Clips episode produced by the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. You can find our show anywhere you listen to podcasts. Make sure you subscribe to the show for the latest episodes and updates, and take a minute to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. For more information about RCVRC and ranked choice voting, check out our website at rcvresources.org. The production of this podcast is supported by the generosity of our donors. Donations can be made directly on the website. Please don't hesitate to contact us with any questions at donate@rcvresources.org. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at RCV Resources and on Facebook and LinkedIn at Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at RCVRC. Our theme music today is Flutterby by Poddington Bear. Until next time, I'm Kelly on behalf of the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center.